I think it's interesting, too, how a piece that Washington decided, both in terms of practicality, but also in terms of his personal belief of only serving 2 terms as president, became sort of codified until we reached the 20th century. And then it had to become law because Franklin Roosevelt, challenged it. And we'll get to that obviously much later. But, it is an interesting point that Washington and Jefferson both put their stamp on the presidency and how people should view that office. I think it's interesting how Mr. Jefferson's approach was different.
Indeed. So Jefferson's the third president, and he really objected to too much formality, too much pomposity, too much pomp and circumstance in the first two administrations. And for example, John Adams, as the first vice president, was the presiding officer over the Senate, and he held up the business of the Senate for a couple of weeks by insisting that we adopt titles of nobility for our national officers. And he honestly believed that a republic is a pretty thin form of government, and we probably need some props. We probably need to add some majesty to the thing so that people will understand the importance of our new national government. So he wanted the president to be called His Excellency and the Protector of American Liberties and so on. And he was devising titles for everybody. And finally, James Madison, who was serving in the first Congress of the United States, pointed out that there was a title, that this being was to be called the President of the United States. And of course, that's how things have been ever since. But because John Adams was so obsessed with this unnecessarily, he got the wits of Congress began to call him His Rotundity because he was a chubby man, and also they called him the Duke of Braintree, which was the town that he lived in, which was a suburb of Boston. And so this backfired on poor John Adams. He also used to wander around with a ceremonial sword. You think, well, what is a ceremonial sword doing in a republic in the United States? That's Napoleon. That's George III or something. That's Frederick the Great. But Adams wore the ceremonial sword, and the reports we get are he sort of tripped on it. And he didn't know. He wouldn't have known how to use it. He wouldn't have known how to use it any more than he know how to use a modern chainsaw. But he had it, and so we were. I guess the point is that we were struggling. We were experimenting. We were trying to figure it out. The presidency needed to have enough majesty so that it would really mean something. That he wasn't just like the chief clerk. But it also needed to be different from monarchy. And Jefferson was very serious about this, David. So when he became president, in an act of political theater, he walked to his inauguration. He eschewed a military escort. He wore gentleman's clothes, but he didn't wear a sword or anything like that. He handled his own grocery shopping in Washington, D.C. He rode his horse without an escort around the city. He greeted people at the entrance to the White House himself. He didn't have liveried servants doing this sort of thing. He eschewed all of those monarchical forms as he saw them and believed that the president should not be an exalted figure. He should be the first citizen, and that he was going to show us that that was the proper style. So just within the first three presidencies, you have a kind of a whiplash effect. Washington leaning towards monarchical forms and Jefferson leaning in the other direction.